Hey everyone, welcome back to our fourth and
Hi.
final playtest. We want to give a big shout out to Wandering DM and Simon for hosting us for this initial alpha playtest, as well as give a shout out because I've forgotten in the past, and that's my bad, to the sponsors of this channel. We have Found Familiar Coffee, where you can get all of your caffeinating needs. They have some great different, TTRPG inspired blends and flavors. You can also reach out to Mage Hand Press. They do 5e supplements as well as the Dark Matter campaign setting. There was a long running campaign of that here on Wandering DM. You could find on their YouTube channel if you want to see how it plays out. And then Roll20 is a sponsor of the channel as well. And we will be using Roll20 again today as we work on our, with our cards and the checks in which we do. So thank you again to Wandering DM and to the sponsors that make this channel possible. So to recap, we kind of wrapped up last time with the concept of monsters and the occurrence of them in Omens Rising. And we had a split in the party. Robin and Wander made their way back to the village for two different purposes. Robin was headed there to engage in some of the farming interventions that the Aether Tech that she brought with her could potentially provide. And Wander wanted to speak to, I believe it was Aurora, correct? Fen, is that correct?
Aurora to start, and then probably everybody else as a whole, if depending on how Aurora reacted and that
sounds good. And then headed south was Hayek and Etsky and Flick, as they wanted to see what was in that direction that the signs were pointing to make sure that, I guess in my opinion, is to make sure that we had adequate coverage, so to speak, of all of the different possibilities. So we're going to pick up where we left off. And I'm going to do kind of a montage here, starting with the walk south. And then we're going to move our way to Robin at the fields and then Wander at the village. So as the group of you heads south, I know Hayek is not with us for this final episode, but we wish them well as they are celebrating with family. Flick and Etsky, give us a little bit of a idea of like what it is you're looking for. What are you keeping your eyes? What is your intent as you head south?
Do you want to go first?
I'll go first. I think Etsky is just curious. Etsky believes that the road to restoration with this omen is still, these people need to grip with their fear of leaving, which is to say they should probably leave. But he is curious about what this archway represents, if it's like part of the omen in general, or if it's just kind of like something else.
I'm muted. And Flicker? Sorry.
Flick is there for a multiple of reasons. They believe that to go into the unknown is to where they should go, to understand, to learn what is going on. So that is in alignment with a little bit of Etsky. They also went away and into the south because they thought it isn't their place to tell this group of silent walkers where they should walk, but what they can provide is at least the footsteps out into a place that is unknown, because it is, in a sense, a physical, something you can physically see. So like footsteps into the south, into a place beyond that they have not yet traveled, and that may give them some reassurance that whilst there are the dangers, you can still walk ahead, and that is the way of the silent walkers. And I guess also as a part of that, they do want to know about the archway as well, and in a sense assist, like Etsuki with sort of that path of restoration in a way. The Silent Walker village, I think they believe is well covered with Robin and Wanda, and they think that their place is among the people that are traveling into the unknown.
Excellent. So, as the three of you make your way south and see what the Aether is and this monster is pointing toward in many ways, you will find the archway that Robin had spotted in her spyglass. What is something that each of you fears?
Ooh. Let's see.
For Flick is all about hope and sort of like that light and that comfort and that warmth. So I think that in terms of like the fear is in a way the inability to provide that, and sort of to associate with the idea of shadows and things like that, something that is consuming of the light, or like an all-consuming darkness in a way. That would be what Flick would be fearful of.
Okay. Etsuki?
I think Etsuki would be afraid of a disconnect from magic, or like his prophecy, like full severance. It's the only reason he feels confident in doing anything in the primal realm, and so I think that would be like his biggest fear.
Excellent. As you walk south toward that archway that you can see off in the distance, the world around you gets a little gloomier. There are heavy, gray, nearing black clouds coalescing in the sky above you. They hang low, much lower than what you had seen before when there were clouds in the distance. The world itself feels closing in. Visibility starts to decrease, except for the archway. The shadows seem to be pointing in multiple directions as light becomes diffused and harder to identify. They even become muted, as if they struggle to speak. Etsuki, the prime is very heavy. upon you. I wouldn't say that you feel cut off, but you really feel the strong presence of the prime, much more so than a balance of them.
Do not like that.
Which, or I should say, how does each one of you respond?
Etsky definitely kind of has to like pace himself on the like on a step forward. He like stops and he kind of is anxious. He's like rubbing his fingers together. I mean, he understands the nature of this omen, so he's not like as freaked out as he would be if it was just like happening.
As much as Etsky is certain that this is connected to the omen, Etsky, there is no indication that this power is illusory. It feels very real.
Oh no, I don't like that.
So while you know the connection for sure, it's not clear on your base aptitudes, your base ranks,
Right.
that it is anything other than a real manifestation caused by the monster of this valley.
He's gonna have to shut his eyes. He's like, I have to shut it out. If I'm gonna be primal, I'm gonna have to be like my body.
Okay.
He's just gonna walk forward. Probably hit a wall, but he's going to walk forward without opening his eyes.
And Flick, what's Flick doing?
Flick's eyes are open, so trying to avoid that from happening. Does it look like it's going to rain or anything?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The clouds are low enough in the sky that it looks similar to a storm about to start.
Mm-hmm.
However, other indications are less clear.
Okay. I think that I like to believe Flick is pretty intuitive and has a good sense of sort of the fear that is sort of creeping in kind of thing. As if, when a storm is coming, you can kind of get that sense that it's happening in a way. And being conscious of the people around, whilst it may not be necessarily welcome, it's one of those, I'm going to be confident in the face of like fear, and I'm going to take those bold steps forward. I would have said that it's sort of like the motion is almost like leaping and dance like sort of thing when they're stepping forward, and every step has its weight in front of it. And it's sort of that similar sense of if it's you and someone and they're scared of a bug, and you're like, I am the person that is not scared of bugs, but deep down you are terrified, and you're sort of like, I'm going to deal with this situation and be the one that tries to be reassuring and grab that little buggy and like let it go kind of thing. That sort of how Flick reacts. So there's
sort of a physical overcompensation,
motions, heavy footing
kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah, and I think they would probably, and they'd probably be humming or making a sort of like a noise or something that is a presence, at least for Etsky and Hyatt, to connect themselves still that, like, they're not alone. And that would be how Flick reacts. But,
As
yeah.
you all push on, the feelings will intensify the closer you get to the archway. If we were going to go deeper into this plot line, we'd probably see if there were some checks if you wanted to investigate whatnot. But we're going to kind of fast forward a little bit. And as you endeavor to persevere, the moment that you cross the threshold, and you have to exit, because the archway actually takes up all of the ground at the southern end. It's basically an archway at the southern end of the valley. And as you push through or as you cross that threshold, it all melts away.
Etsy is so dramatic. He's like, oh, I hated that.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
I'm surprised.
You
I
good,
didn't
Etsky?
Oh God. Oh God. Is this what the rest of you feel like? Is that what you guys feel like all the time? Just like all prime. All the time. That was awful.
All prime all the time.
All prime all the time.
Oh, that's iconic.
Oh, there's certain levels, but yeah, a little bit. Lean toward a little bit myself towards the ethereal, but it is all prime all the time for the most part.
Can I have a drink? We gotta get a drink.
Etsky needs water and then a stiff drink to follow it up as a chaser. Hydrate, then drink.
Yeah.
So as you all have that sense of relief, I'm assuming that you recognize basically the message that's being sent here.
1000%. If I was not clear on it before, it was just like, okay, work.
Yeah. So while the physical place is exiting the southern part of the valley, the actual thing that they must overcome is something entirely different. As we then pan backwards north up to the valley into the fields, we find Captain Robin and some of the crew from the ship, along with some of the aether tech that was brought along for tilling the fields. And what else does the aether tech do?
Oh gosh, Wassa, what did we decide? It was like this.
It was a glorified Pez dispenser.
That's what you called it.
Yeah. So like plant goes in with nutritional soil, and then it just like provides sort of like that.
Sorry.
That's all good. That sort of initial stage of like, when you plant like rice and things like that, it's got like the hole, you put the plant in it, and it's like got enough of a home that it can establish. That's what the aether tech that you had involved, and it was rotary as well as something that was not a permanent fixture. So basically what that would mean is it's mobile and it's light, so it's small time in a sense. Like you wouldn't be able to do like mass production with it. It's sort of like for if you're staying there for a little bit, that's what you would use this for in particular.
Mm-hmm.
A headcanon now that it just plays that noise as it does it.
Yeah, you just like
Just
Pez
like
on, and it's like
Each time that it takes that pellet and shoves it into the ground, it's little like triumph chime.
it's the success noise. It's the success noise.
Headcanon
It's like a little
accepted.
Mario
I
coin
love
gun.
that. That just that brings me a ridiculous amount of joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
That's,
so yeah,
that's-
you'd probably thank you. Yeah, you'd probably see Robin in the field with some of her crew, or kind of demonstrating how this piece of aether tech works and attempting to plant a couple seeds in the ground and kind of really just like poking around and experimenting and seeing if, as a group, if they can kind of figure out what their whether the aether tech is helpful at all to this soil, or if it's something else entirely.
So after, I'm assuming, some time of trying it a couple of places and then showing the local villagers how to use it and having them use it, we'll say that the most of one of the mid-size fields has been planted. By the time you get through all of these demonstrations and people wanting to try it out and all of that sort of thing. And you will notice.
Can I also add that I
Sure.
probably gave them the winter wheat as well?
Oh, good.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And as this is happening, you will notice a pathway in the ground that is forming. It looks similar to the path that someone might walk. It's about the same width as a person. And the soil and everything that's been replanted in that area has its vitae just leached right out of it.
Oof.
And it's not walking necessarily toward anyone in particular that you can see, but it's making its way generally toward the village.
So it's almost like you can see, it's almost like you can see a particular line being woven in the field. Is it coming from that south area that we walked to before? Is that kind of the impression?
It did originate in the south, and it's making its way. But the southern part is also the place where it has not been planted yet. So it's coming out of that has not been planted section, and it's making its way toward the northern side or to the opposite side of the field. And it moves very much like a person would walk. No footprints, but its pacing, everything is very reminiscent of if you just put a person there, it would be someone walking. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I think Robin would put the lens up to her eye and just see if she can see anything in that moment.
Yes. You would see a person, spectral form. They look very similar to the people that live in this village, clothed very similar markings, everything. And they are just walking like it's just a normal day.
Oh my goodness. I think she would invite the villagers to come take a look through the lens to see for themselves.
One by one, they do, with varying reactions. We'll get more into that after Wander begins their conversation, starting with Aurora. So, Wander, you have the audience of the village elder. What do you wish to do with it?
Wander starts off their interaction by using their Okan
Mm-hmm.
to play what their sister, their sister told them.
Mm.
And they just hold it in both their hands, kind of standing across from the village elder, Aurora, for a minute.
And what is an Ocon? Or
An
should I
Ocon-
turn that over to Wasa?
I think I was going to answer
Okay.
it. An Ocon is a device, generally metal or I believe kind of some composite in nature, that projects a hologram, and that can be of any experience that a silent walker has encountered. In their time, if I'm understanding these correctly, if I remember that right.
Mhm.
And it is used to share things that they've experienced with other people in a better way than words can describe. But it also allows for people that they do not have a telepathic communication, say another silent walker. It spans broader audiences than just other silent walkers. And though they could also use telepathy in this encounter, I think it made more sense for them to use the Ocon.
Mm-hmm.
So, if I remember correctly, the holograms are kind of a like bluish teal color in nature, but I think it might also just be dependent on the Ocon itself as well. I'm not sure on that one. So,
Excellent.
that's an Ocon.
Yeah.
And Chantal will correct me if I got something wrong.
No, I think you did a great
They're
job.
good.
So, as you communicate this way, and it allows, in this sense, a different way to share what you had experienced, and maybe a more appropriate way, being that you wouldn't have to open yourself up so vulnerably in order to express it.
Additionally, not burden them with the
Mhm.
emotions that are tied to this
Exactly.
experience.
And there's a shift in Aurora's posture, surprise on her face. I did not know she tried to return.
I did not know either.
You are the first to have successfully returned.
The first to have lived the welcoming party, mayhaps.
Fair.
She said that we must leave. And off in the distance there is an archway, not visible to the normal eye, but with use of some tools from a good friend of mine, we have discovered it.
Oh,
And through that archway, beyond the storms that have boxed us in, proverbially, there lies another place to begin walking again, if we so choose.
she takes a deep breath and sits with your words. So much has been lost by trying to continue to walk. How do we know that anyone will survive? With our own eyes and experiences, so far only one has, and that is you.
If one can survive, anyone can survive. You have to believe, and you have to let the truths of yourself be more than the fears that plague you.
Aurora promises to sit with these words and to share them and the findings that you have shared with the rest of the village. But she says, not all of us are brave enough to walk again. And as Etsky and Flick return, as Robin and the villagers gather to share what they've seen in the fields, as Wander and Aurora come out to meet the rest of the village, we see a montage of things. We see an exchange, some excited, some fearful, from what was seen in the field. One person remarking that they saw their great-grandmother when they looked through the lens. And they are fearful that their ancestor's spirit is trapped here. There are others that think of the place as haunted, and others that think of the place as being connected to those who came before them. There is no consensus as the group packs up and gets ready to move on. But there is a direction. And if nothing else, the village will be required to make a choice due to the presence of each of you. And that's where we're going to wrap up our little narrative. And I want to kind of wrap things up there as a reminder that not all stories have neat and crisp endings, but they don't have to be negative. Sometimes they just have to be moving on to the next step, the next phase, the next part of some sort of cycle. In this case, I think, and I can't remember which one of you, but one of you, I believe, has a 10 for your origin card. And it places you in a spot where you are someone who tends to usher cycles from the end of one on to the beginnings of the next.
I think that might be one character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that definitely would describe how this chapter of the story, if you will, concludes. So I'd like to start with whoever wants to start and just kind of go around the table. This is the first time that we've, as well, I think that many of you have actually played out a story arc of any sort with the system itself. You've all done character creation and a few other elements of the actual gameplay. But when it comes to playing out a story, it's relatively new. So what sort of impressions are you left with?
Trying to figure out how to say this.
Yeah.
People
And because I forgot to do it earlier, introduce yourself to chat as you give your impressions.
Okay. I'm Jamar. I write the Kisnoek. So if you liked Etsky, I made that, where he's from at least. And him, actually. I made both. I am writing a graphic novel, and I just graduated college, so that's cool. And as far as impressions go, there's really no other way to say it. It's a lot more narrative than my brain was expecting, even though it is literally like it's on the box that it's a narrative experience. And I guess like in a lot of ways I wasn't like expecting it, because again I come from a land of like D&D and Pathfinder, where like the narrative comes out of like micro actions that a person makes, instead of like, I don't know, these like moments, I can only call them, that are just like, this sounds really crazy, but instead of feeling like I'm being like zapped into action every 5 seconds, I feel like it's just kind of breathing out. And I know that doesn't make any cognitive sense, but you know what? We're just going to go with it. I like it. I actually kind of want to like run a few for myself, see what kind of weirdness I can get up to.
I feel you though. It's like kind of like if you know a whale shark is big, and then you see a whale shark and you're like, that is very large, sort of thing, in terms of, oh, this is a narrative game. It is like mostly narrative and like character choices and character influences, and then you sort of get immersed into it, and then it's just so much more than you would expect. So I do resonate with that. I'm Wasa. That's my introduction. And yeah, so I resonate a lot with that. Similar vein, checks and choices had like a greater like breadth about them. They had like a lot more expanse and influence on the direction of the story. And you didn't, everything flowed in a way where, for example, Flick and Etsky removing themselves from like the village and going somewhere else didn't feel like, oh, we made a bad decision and this is detrimental to the end goal, sort of thing. Everyone has their part to play, and everything has that influence that you can see can mesh into the story and provide sort of like alternative paths and a bigger world than what you may necessarily feel in other games, where it seems like there is a right and a wrong answer, and the right answer is always directed in a certain direction, like diplomacy or combat, and you'll like go the diplomacy route, and then it goes into combat kind of thing. You don't really get that. This could have had, I feel like, some combative experience, but with the way that it played out, that was still a solution, and it wasn't sort of like a we're not satisfied, like unsatisfied experience sort of thing. You don't really get that because it's like, oh, like we did it this way, and that still works. And in terms of consequences, there are going to be consequences and there are going to be solutions, but it's not necessarily like we won everything and achieved all the things. It's very much more human, I guess, and more natural in terms of the way that it all played out. So that was a lot more than I expected as well in that regard. And yeah, I really enjoyed the fact that it was that organic narrative sort of experience that I love. But that's it. I think that's it. Yeah.
Fun fact, I used to work at the Georgia Aquarium, so I know how big a whale shark is.
I went to the Osaka Aquarium when I went to Japan, and I was like, whale sharks, and then I saw them and I was like, whale sharks.
Yeah, I second what you both have said. Hello, my name is Leona. I am the writer of the one of the halves of the twin cultures. I write the Burgundy half. I'm also one of the consultants on the project. I definitely agree that it is. I feel so spoiled. I really do feel spoiled because I love a narrative game, and it's just like there is so much here that is narrative, and it's just like I play other games now, and I'm like, oh my god, come on, like just let me have the narrative, because it's so much more like focused on the story, and like so much more like I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like it's almost like you're not bogged down by other bits and pieces, you know? You're not having to like, you don't have to worry about the nitty-gritty. You can just get into the story and into the details of the story, and you can just focus on making those decisions or exploring options, and everything is valuable. Every option has some merit to it or some flaw to it at the same time. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that I was able to like consistently come back to this story and to see how it would develop next, and how how it all just kind of flowed. Because yeah, I've only ever played a one shot of this, so it's been neat to see that it does carry the same magic to it, even in a longer form. I'm sure I have more thoughts, but everything is still chaotic up here because it's just been an amazing time. So we'll see what comes up.
I also agree with all of you. No, hi, I'm Fen. I'm a graphic designer of sorts here doing the character sheet stuff. Good me. Good, really professional. Good job. No, sorry. Hi, I'm Fen. I do the character sheet graphic design work. I also agree that this is a very fun narrative heavy game that I love absolutely, and I would love to play more of it in the future. I do like that the only checks you need to do or should do is to progress the narrative forward. So you can have entire conversations like the one we had at the end with Aurora and have that matter, but not need to give it a mechanic to matter. And I think that's something that really could be adopted into a lot of other games, and it just kind of depends on who you're playing with. I feel like that's something that just is a thing that can be used elsewhere as well to achieve the same result. But I do love that it's a focus point of this game. I love the use of cards and how they factor into it. I love the use of the interesting things, especially as a GM, how they use the cards. Because I saw you put that ace of diamonds in there, Chris. You can't get away from me that easy.
Yeah, I played ace of diamonds to figure out how much the fear influence would have and what kind of influence, which is why I felt very primal, because it was diamonds. ace was a 14. Played a 10 of diamonds for the field to see how that would manifest and how it would work. And so I played around with that. I had other options, but yeah, I followed the exact same rules you all did when I played those cards.
But I really like how that both that impacts as well as the cards you use to create a character, which we've done a few of, and my character was the one with the 10s, which makes sense given the nature of the journey we all went on. But I love how everything seems to fit into the characters in the world that you're trying to storytell. I would love to play more of this group in particular in the future, just because you all are amazing people and the group is a great time. So let's here's the cool things about the game that we're making, but I'm just praising everybody because you guys are amazing people and I'm very happy to.
And cool people working together make cool games, right?
Yeah, this is kind of how it works out. Cool things happen when you introduce cool people to cool people.
Look, I will always play witchy nerds with social problems.
Yes.
Love it. So my next question to you all would be, now that you've kind of had this little run through, did it feel like, I mean, every game kind of has its place, right? And I heard all of you kind of talk about this is a narrative game. I know it says it's on the box, but this is a narrative game. What are some of the things that you think could be difficult for a new player picking up a game like this?
I think if unless somebody else has a quick buzzer answer, I think it'd be a challenge for the individuals that have only played D&D and nothing else, that have lived in that world where roles make everything matter, and you need to roll something well in order to do anything, whether it be sorry, I'm gonna catch up on chat. But where you in that world, so going from that to this, where nothing matters unless you are, well, nothing matters for a role type situation unless you're moving the plot forward. Otherwise, it's not important. That'd probably be a big shift. It's bad just on both sides of the DM screen there, for GMs and players. I think it'd be a very interesting thing. Also, the difference from cards and dice, I think it'd be a big bridge to gap, not undoable. And I think it'd be really good for people who have only played D&D to play something like this, or anything else that's narrative heavy in general. And understanding the difference in those play styles, and because you can then take this some of the fun stuff that isn't really system specific here and put it back in D&D.
Mm-hmm.
I can actually, if I may,
go on. Yeah.
That. There is one thing I've been thinking about, and it's like the fact of problem solving isn't super simple in Omens Rising. And that's not a bad thing. But for people who dealing with puzzles, dealing with ethical dilemmas, people who steep themselves in sci-fi, fantasy, moral quandaries, right fantasy, and all this other stuff. We're all writers, and so thinking about how to progress the story is easier for us than it is for a normal human person who just goes do their 9 to 5 and then they come home and they're like, I want to play D&D with my friends and hit stuff with a sword or whatever. And I know that I've played with a lot of new people in D&D, and one thing that they've always struggled with is just figuring out how to make those critical decisions. Sometimes they run with it. They're already running with their own fantasy. Those people would be feeling Omens Rising because they can make that work for them. But then there was those people that are I don't see that on my sheet.
Mm-hmm.
What are my actions? What are my capabilities? Because there are people that if I don't know what my options are. There are both of those ways of thinking are something that happen it's like, you know, any and one of us could be one of those people, really. Like it's such a if this or that kind of thing. And again, this is not a bad thing, but it's something I would make like be aware of, I guess, if you were like GMing this, like making simple, like actionable choices that they can do, suggestions, things like that. Obviously we didn't need it because we all had like thoughts and feelings about every moment of every second, but if you're playing with like new people that are just doing whatever it is they do.
I'm gonna jump off of that actually, and I think the reason why we had so many thoughts and feelings and ideas of what to do is probably because of how strong the session 0 abilities are. You know, we really bonded as a group in our session 0, and we were like, okay, let's play off of each other, and okay, let's you know, like there was all of this like, okay, now I have a vibe of your character, okay, now I understand your character, and we were able to really connect in a way that really like enabled us the moment we started session 1 to kind of know where everyone was at, you know. And so I think that session 0 system is going to be so key, and I would be so curious to see what would happen with completely inexperienced players that are new to tabletop RPGs if they had that session 0 experience and how they fared with this game. Because interestingly enough, as you talked about you know, players not knowing their options, I had the opposite thing where I felt like I had plenty of options in this game, and it was like I could come up with anything in the world and kind of roll with it. But in my D&D game that I'm playing, my home game, I was arguing with the DM. We were like, because I was like, I don't know what my options are in this fantasy world. Like, how does this town work? What am I supposed to do here? Would my character know this? You know, and I was just like, I raised a fuss with him because I was like, I don't know what my options are, and you haven't told me what my options are. So I'm just doing what seems like it should be done, and I'm being penalized for it, you know. And so we had this whole little discussion between the two of us where it was like, well, okay, if I'm trying to do what sounds right because I don't know any other way of doing, then why am I being punished for that, you know, if that's not the outcome that you were expecting? So it's kind of this interesting I've kind of got this interesting comparison going in my brain of that was a scenario where I didn't know what my options were, and so I decided to go with what felt the most natural, and yet it wasn't beneficial. Whereas here, I guess even when I didn't know what my options are, whatever I picked would still move the narrative forward. You know, it wasn't like I was penalized for trying to explore something or trying to figure something out or just doing what felt the most natural. Maybe it wasn't the ideal thing to do, but still gave me something, if not, you know, the entire picture. So I think that key point of moving the narrative forward is so rewarding, right? You don't end up feeling punished for making a decision, and you don't end up feeling frustrated for that because you're still making progress, right? And sometimes, and I think there's a lot of humanity to this game, you know, because some days we make huge leaps of progress, and some days the best we can do is get out of bed, and that's our progress for the day. And that's the same for our characters, because sometimes our characters are going to make choices where they get just a tiny bit of progress, and then sometimes they'll make decisions like holding up a lens to their spyglass where they get to see something ginormously dramatic, you know. And so I think there's a lot of humanity. Yeah, I will pause there because I've got other thoughts, but I don't want to take up all the air in the room.
Well, but on that thought, I want to kind of shift us a little bit on those lines, though. Having a sense of accomplishment is something that we know from psychology and sociology is extremely important for engagement, for people to feel like they belong in a circumstance or in an organization or in a group. Do you feel like by knowing that the actions that you invest in, the ones that you put effort into, so to speak, by playing cards on, move the narrative forward, does that give you a sense of accomplishment, or is it kind of maybe?
I did find myself in a kind of maybe, like there were times where I was like, yes, I feel this. I'm feeling it now. And there are times where I was just like, well, obviously this is what's going to happen. I mean, and this is the same thing happens in D&D a lot of the time. Like when you're playing a bard and you have +10 to performance and then you're asked to perform anything, you're like, of course I'm going to do well. But one thing I think this is just because I haven't seen it yet. I want to see someone fail a check, like fully like face plant. You know, you see that all the time in D&D. People like roll something and it's out in kaputs. But because there's, you know, you usually have 4 options and you can choose one. Almost no one chooses the worst one. And while that's not, I feel like if there were slightly less choices, like if they were both like really low, we would probably see that more often. But with the 4, it's like, you know, the chances of me having only low cards is already pretty low, especially when it's split up between 6 people.
I love that point, and I just want to throw something out there while you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
When we to kind of build off of the this feels very human, which was mentioned by both Wasa and Leona,
Yes.
in our everyday life, when we end up failing or running into failure, it's usually when we are doing something that pushes us beyond what we know we're capable of. Right? How often do we do that though in everyday life?
That's true.
So my question is if you want to see failure, you have to take chances that will put you in a position to succeed or fail. But if you choose things that you know are going to be successful 90% of the time, you're going to be successful 90% of the time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I think that's what you saw play out.
Yeah.
Because we didn't actually have a circumstance where anybody needed to push themselves beyond what they knew they were capable of.
No one asked Etsy to do a push-up.
or in that case, even with the Aether, you didn't like there wasn't an attempt to try and tap into these spirits to see what happened in the past. Like that would have been really trying to, you know, to try and see the past would have been pushing the bounds of what people are capable of.
Writes that down.
And so, like, if that was something that Etsky had tried to do, like when they saw those footsteps or when he saw those footsteps, you know, I want to do this. And you're like, all right. And I've got this ace. And I'm like, awesome. That's, you know, 23. But, you know, the target number for something that is improbable is a 36.
Gee.
So you still would have been, it wouldn't have been a critical failure. But it would have been close.
Yeah.
Anything that would have been 18 points or less would have been a critical failure. And 18 isn't a bad number. But nobody was pushing that boundary. So we didn't have them.
That's true. Very true.
And that's on me, but I also wasn't looking to show that off necessarily this time for this play test. But that's on me. I didn't put you in a position where you had to try and go up against insurmountable odds and really kind of play with that level of, you know, like I'm all in kind of feeling,
Right.
You know? So
I don't want you to be like, you did not fail by not having us fail.
Oh, no. I get that. But I'm just saying, like, that was a choice. As the GM, I didn't put you in a circumstance where you would have to do that.
Right.
And because of that, you didn't ever fail because you always had an option because you were within a comfort zone. In a longer campaign, you're going to run into those.
Oh, yeah.
You're absolutely going to run into those.
Entering a slightly haunted town. Yeah, that's my wheelhouse.
But this brings up a very good question. How often should failure arise in order to feel like it's possible?
That I even couldn't tell you. Like, even in my time in D&D, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, because like some people get really frustrated with failing all the time and then they disengage, right? Because everything's up to a roll. Other times people are like, if I don't have a sense of failure, I don't have a sense of success. So I need to know it's possible. So I need to know that's there. So that's kind of all of that brought me back to failure is important to this game, but it's on both the GM and the players to interact in scenarios that will put you in a position where you should have a chance of failure.
There should be a 1 mile sprint that Etsky has to do.
There you go. If Etsky had to run back to the village in order to save both Flick and Hayek, we might have actually seen it show up.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It would be like, I'll get there.
I kind of listening to this conversation, I'm almost wondering if there are scenarios where we lose cards from our hand and our options become limited. And I can see Fen cringing at that idea. I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility of like what happens when we do have less choices and we have greater stakes. And does that increase the stakes if we have less cards in our hand? Does that mean that we're more likely to potentially fail? I don't know if that's a good idea. That might be a horrible idea, but I just thought I would throw it out there.
Kind of sexy though. I know that Emmer did a whole bunch of math to make the 4 cards work.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, which I totally get. I'm just throwing an idea out there, and I have no idea if it makes any sense
or something.
Yeah,
like you could be blocked from like one of the suits in a way. That would be terrible.
I think that'd be my only kind of concern is that like you'd end up being put into a corner where even if you should succeed, you will still fail. And that's sometimes as life, but at the same time, it'd probably be pretty frustrating to end up there.
Yeah.
Even if you're.
Yeah. What I would say to that is if you're put in that situation because it makes sense to the story, the GM can just raise the target number.
That's true.
And by raising the target number, you create basically a circumstance where certain acts are going to be impossible because the math.
Math.
And so if that's the case, that certain acts are impossible, no matter how good your ranks are, they should also be upfront about that before anyone tries it. And secondly, like you can't level off of that stuff because you know it's inevitable you'll fail. But to like that's why instead of limiting or giving pluses and minuses for everything, like some games do, or limiting skills or taking away dice or whatever the case may be, it's simply just adjust the threshold. The threshold becomes your barometer for success and failure. And the GM just is like, all right, we need to make it this hard. And there's a guideline in there telling you basically based on the math, what's going to be no brainer versus what's going to be improbable. And anything beyond improbable is likely impossible. Because I think the maximum someone can get, if I remember correctly, is going to be 37. You would have to have a heroic rank. It would have to be one that you got affinity alignment on for the +1. You'd have to be using your affinity suit for a +2 and a significant item for an additional +1. And that's why that 36 is improbable. It can happen, but everything has to be in your favor.
The gods have to be on your side.
Yeah.
So that means you also drew a joker because that's 15 points. So ace or joker are the only ways to succeed on it, 36 or higher, 36 or 37. So that's 6 cards out of 54. So like that math has been done for the GM to kind of make these things happen. It's just, so I don't know that it's necessary to add additional limitations.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense now that
Yeah,
you
that's true.
kind of explained that. I had no idea about that. So
Yeah, because I mean, 18 is the highest base rating you can have. Well, 19 technically with affinity alignment during character creation. So 19 is the highest base alignment you can have. The maximum number of pluses that you can get is a +3 based on other elements of the game, putting you at a base of 22, and the highest point card is a 15. So that's 37.
Time to game the system.
Yeah, and so that's exactly what you're doing. Is you're like, how do I want this system to play? And I want this to feel super difficult. So I'm going to make it super difficult by setting the threshold at 30. Because not everything has to align, but you better have a really good card and you better have a pretty high rank.
Mm-hmm.
Because at a 9, you've got a 24, maybe 25. And that's rank 3. So you're going to have to then, work on that to kind of play around with it. So, like there's all like that's the part of the GM, and that's why the math was so important to put together. And we'll codify that and put that into the Oracle's guide for the GM to show them how to make things feel difficult or easy, comfortable or awkward based on your thresholds.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So now with all of those questions that we've had, or conversation that we've had, I would hope some of the people in chat, if you have any questions that you'd like to add, we're going to come back and take any questions that are out there. And if there aren't any questions, we also have a couple other things that we'll talk about, which is back to like the origins of where monsters come from and the origins of these characters, a little bit more about them.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be back in about 5-10 minutes. Please stick around for our Q&A session. We have had a lovely time with you all. Welcome back, and thank you for your patience. We were having a very lively discussion in the green room, and we are back now for your questions, if you have any at this stage. So, and that can be from any episode, going back to the beginning. And while we wait for questions in the chat, they can be, remember, they can be of lore, they can be of the mechanics that you saw, they can be about what we're going to be doing in the future, any of those things. And while that's going on, I want to talk about origins again. This has kind of been the theme of this playtest, is the origins of things. So let's talk about, I mentioned the origin card of the character creation. And I said that I believe somebody in the group had a 10. Who was that? Which character is that has a 10 as their origin card?
I believe it is Wander.
Wander has a 10. Excellent, which fits thematically quite well. So the origin card does two things. One, I also mentioned affinity suit. Your origin card is the first card played as part of your character's divination spread. And the suit of that card is their natural inclination, what they are most connected to when it comes to the 4 suits. And so that character automatically gets a +2 anytime that they play that suit. It doesn't matter which aptitude they use or what the check is about. It's an automatic +2 because they are in their element, pardon the pun. So, let's first go around and talk about that one. What is everyone's affinity suit? So Wander, we'll start with Fenn's character.
Wander's affinity suit was hearts.
Hearts. So hearts is the suit of emotions, the element of water, wisdom, and hopefully we saw some of that as the audience playing out with the character, because I sure did as the GM, but I also had a sneak peek into the character itself. Let's go on to Etsky and Jamar. What was the affinity suit? What was the suit of your origin card?
So Etsky's affinity suit is the clubs.
The Aethral Self and the suit of fire. I love it. And we definitely saw Etsky doing a lot with the Aether. So leaned into that quite well.
Oh, yes.
And Wasa.
Wasa was clubs also.
And we saw that with the shadows and the ways that the shadows spoke with Flick. Interesting.
Why Etsky likes Flick the most.
I love the fact that Wasa, you chose shadows as kind of what they connected to, because like shadows are kind of like the product of fire, the other side of it, like,
Yeah.
And I really dig that connection. It was awesome. And Leona, what is Robin's affinity suit?
Robin is spades.
Spades, the airship captain, and the intellectual or mental self, looking for ways to problem solve. Did a number of those things. Love it.
If
Love
I
the way.
remember correctly,
Mhm.
at Hyatt's was also hearts.
Yes, water and emotion and wisdom, which fit very well with the healer that they are. Excellent point there, Jamar. So we're going to pause because we do have a question from Simon. I want to learn more about monsters. If they come from the belief people have in them, how do they come into being? For example, if I have recurring nightmares about Monster X, does it become real right away after a certain amount of time? Like if I truly believe it is not my imagination and is actually a monster. No, that makes total sense. Belief is... So everything that comes from the Aether has 3 parts. It has what is pulling it or drawing it from the Aether. It has a conduit, something that it ties to in the prime, and then it has an effect. So a nightmare by itself has, if it's believed as real, has the that's the pull. That belief is the pull. The nightmare itself is the conduit. Those dreams that you're having in the prime is your conduit, and the effect is however it affects your character. Or you can say the mind is the conduit, and the nightmares are the effect. As long as the nightmares persist, technically the monster persists. So just the fact of having nightmares themselves could be seen and interpreted as someone's personal monster. On the flip side of that, though, for it to manifest broader, it needs broader belief. Something that is believed locally will be, kind of stuck in that area. Something that is believed much more broadly, worldwide, would be able to traverse the world. So there's bits and pieces of interpretation there, but the basic concept is for a monster to manifest is it has to have a draw for the power of aether, it has to have a conduit, and it has to have an effect that's going to happen. Now, the other caveat I want to throw out there is the quality of the conduit affects how long it can last. So if the belief is waning, it's not drawing a lot of power. If we're talking about nightmares are very limited in what they are capable of. They're only at certain times when people are sleeping, that sort of thing. So there are limitations upon it, making it smaller and has less power over the prime. It also doesn't have a tangible form, which gives it, again, less power over the prime. And then the effect itself will be commensurate with the conduit and the amount of power drawn by how it begins. And I know that's quite a ramble, but did that answer your question?
The spirit of slightly less sleep.
Yeah. Excellent. And that will be codified much more succinctly because we have wonderful editors in the Oracle's Guide when discussing monsters and their creation. So while we're looking for more questions, let's go back to Wander and let's talk about that 10. So we said that the suit was the connection to the prime, to one of the elements of the prime, and how that manifests for that character. The value on the card is connected to that character's ethereal connection. What connects them to the ethereal realm or the aether realm? And I kind of hinted at it, but what was the prophecy of the 10 of Origins?
10 of Origins prophecy is every cycle must come to an end, but with each end, the dawn of a new beginning ignites. Your presence is integral to the renewing of cycles and the recharging of aether.
Absolutely. Now, their presence being there is important for this cycle to end and for a new one to begin. One thing that's unspoken, and we didn't really get into here, well, it's unspoken in the mechanics, but it's spoken out in the GM's rules and player's guide, is if you feel like your prophecy is gives you advantage in a situation, that's basically a +1 that can be conferred, or a lowered target number, depending on how you and the GM work it out. So certain things were much easier for Wander because Wander was in the midst of their prophecy. Does that make sense? Because I go with changing the threshold more than about giving out +1s.
Oh, yeah.
However, some GMs or some players would prefer to be able to see that mechanically on their character. And I'm all about making sure you lean into whatever it is would benefit your players. So let's go to Etski's prophecy. What was the value and what was the prophecy?
So I had the Ace of Clubs specifically.
Ace. So what does the ace tell us?
The Ace tells of new beginnings are drawn to you. You may or may not ever see the fruits of your labors, but you are impetus for active change anywhere you go. Like a sudden gush of a newly created aether font, your power peaks when you are working from scratch or when you are forging new paths.
Well,
you did a decent amount of.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had some cool little lenses that were created at that point as well, huh? So there were a number of things that we saw show up about their connection or his connection in the game with that piece. This is another spot where decreasing the target number or giving a bonus could definitely be done by the GM in order to give a feeling of accomplishment or however it works best for your players and for the ways that they prefer to play the game.
I love my magic class.
Wassa. What was Flick's?
I was
Origin
muted.
card.
I was the Jack of Clubs, which is your fervent vitae bleeds over into the aether, making your connection within it eager and open to new opportunities. Your spirit surges when encountering uncertain situations or unfamiliar peoples. Again, probably why Flick and Etsuki had a lot of vibes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing a theme here. You all were pretty well suited for the problem before you also, as there's a lot of like unfamiliar or new or changing of circumstance involved. And Robin
is the King of Spades, and her prophecy is your relationship with the Aether is one of push and pull, a battle of wills as you are drawn to it. Oh, a battle of wills. As you are drawn to it, it is drawn to you. My apologies, I didn't read that properly. You have the ability to accomplish great feats, but equally may struggle with falling short.
Did you feel a bit of that push and pull?
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Excellent. I'm glad it came through.
Definitely.
We know what you have to do. I don't know if we're going to do that though.
Well, she was very out of her element. This was something that was new territory for her, and I really enjoyed that as a player.
Excellent. So that's a bit about the origin card as part of the spread. It's a 6-card spread that helps you define who your character is, as well as choose their aptitudes as you go along. We will explore more of the cards as we get to the other series. Speaking of, the next series that will begin is on We Are Nerdsmith, and it begins June 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern. But it'll stay on Saturdays, and it'll run the 5th, the 12th, and the 19th. The third series, and that one's going to be focused on the health card and well-being, as well as our encounter mechanics. The third series will begin either the 7th or 14th of June on the Hype Goblin, and will run either 3 or 4 weeks, depending on which day we end up starting on. So that's still being pondered. So that is our next 2 series for June. So Saturdays and Mondays, both at 8 p.m. Eastern, are our start times there. Hey, welcome, Kayla, to the chat. It's good to see you. And so where did you, well, in this case, this piece of folklore, if we want to call it that, originated from the fear of leaving the valley, and that the storms would consume people, and the storms would, dispose of, them. They could not leave because they were trapped, so to speak. We found later that is not the case, and that the monster itself was not malevolent as it appeared to be. It was forcibly trying to move the population out of this location. The ancestors were saying, start walking again. Well, mostly saying, don't fear the storms. However, that message may have gotten lost or corrupted over time and turned into basically leave.
You have got to go.
because we don't know how long this has actually persisted and what other ways they may have tried to communicate, right?
Mm.
So there's a lot of other things that could be explored there, if the group was so inclined. But that's kind of that one. When it comes to some of the origin stories of folklore that you all have experienced, where, or legends are a form of folklore. Where do they start? Like, what do they come from, culturally speaking?
Creepy forests.
Sometimes it's the fear of the unknown, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
Is
that
this like
can
as
be.
a whole, where do legends come from, or like the specifically like fear and things like that?
No, it would be any sort of legend or folklore. You could choose a specific one to discuss. But yeah, just more of a general discussion, so that way people could think about the different places and ways that they could, or places they could draw upon for creating monsters of their own.
Mm-hmm.
I am very much reminded of my grandmother, and for a number of reasons. Because in Hinduism, there's so many traditions and festivals and things like that, and there are so many. It feels like every single family will do things slightly differently. But with my grandmother, it's always been interesting because the folklore and the stories that she will tell related to certain significant dates or religious events. I've always been intrigued, and I always kind of go, well, where did that come from? And it's been interesting to me to realize that a lot of the sort of superstitions that she has, for example, she says, if you do not clean the front of the house, the goddess, I'm assuming the goddess of wealth, but generally the goddess, will leave us. So keep your house clean. And what is the message
Mhm.
there? It was a way to essentially, inspire people to maintain their homes, to look after their homes, to keep well presentable homes, combined with this element of fear almost, where it's like, if you don't do this, something bad will happen. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of what I'm reminded of, is sort of the things she says sometimes, where it's like, we must do this for this reason. And it's interesting because it feels like sometimes the folklore and the stories that we hear are more so about teaching us a value, or teaching us a way to do things, or a way to learn something, rather than, so it's like, it seems like at first it seems like do this or else, and it seems like a fear, but really it was more like this was instilled upon you as a way to provide you this value. And so that's always just been this
Mhm.
interesting kind of push and pull that I've had with my grandmother, of how differently we see the same tale.
I am in agreement about grandmothers and fear of the superstitions, because you reminded me of the one that I had when I was a child. My grandmother would give me this little like winged pin thing, and it was like a little angel sort of thing. And she told me that if I was ever naughty, the wings would break, and I would need to behave again to make the wings whole again.
Ooh.
On certain cases, the wings did break, and that was because I was a rat bag child that rolled around in dirt and climbed on trees. But I think it's sort of like a means of like keeping yourself safe, and having those values within the family, which is like being respectful to your elders, etc., like a lot of those sorts of things. And then my grandmother, being my grandmother, would just buy a new little wing thing and like replace the one that I had. Would I know? No, because it was nap time when it was swapped around. But like like, there are, the stories and little superstitions that come from just like your family or something like that, or there is sort of the ones that are within the culture itself that you have. So like going back to like the Philippine culture and things like that, the monsters involved, so like your white ladies or your mananangals or your the monsters within the history that were shaped and changed because of the history of where you were from, and the tales that were told and woven around certain ideas, certain values, and certain encouraged fears, sort of thing. But that's sort of like, I guess, origins and bits and bobs regarding like monsters and stories and the creation of it. It can come from my experiences, like the old tales of like, Philippine mythos and superstition, as well as the things that parents and grandparents say to for ratbag children that shouldn't climb really high trees, and all that sort of stuff that what Oasa did when they were a child that was naughty. Yeah,
Naughty Wasa.
I was so naughty. It was bad.
I feel like ultimately a lot of like monsters, myths, and all sorts of things are meant to tell, to impart wisdom throughout generations. Regardless if it's like, avoid this or don't do that or do this because it's good for your well-being. It's good for, keeping goddesses or gods or deities appeased. Or to avoid, angering them. It's all to impart wisdom and to make the lives of those that come after the people that create these things easier and better, because it's one less thing that they have to fight as hard. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because it's just as much as someone tells it, someone has to be willing to listen to understand the wisdom that you're trying to impart. I don't really remember anything folklorish growing up in my history, but I also don't really remember much from before 15. So
That's fair.
Yeah. I don't really think, and my family's not very superstitious either. I come from very boring parts of the world, so stories been told. So anyway,
spent a lot of my childhood like actively not listening to my family as far as like cultural lessons. People would be like, "Who's your hero?" And I'm like, "No one." I'm gonna go with no one, or anime characters. But I know that one thing that I kept thinking about is like small things that I didn't realize I had thought of. Like, this isn't really like a legend. It's more like just like, I don't know. I grew up in Southern California, so mine were much more urban and there weren't really legends. They were just kind of like truths. But as far as legends go, like, I guess that's why I wasn't really into legends as a kid, even though I was a really superstitious kid. I hated all things spooky. I thought my mom was possessed by a witch once in a haunted house. Now I'm obsessed with them. So shows you childhood me. There's not really a point here. I am rambling, but I think in a lot of ways, these like little myths I hear about, like, people love cryptids like Loch Ness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm one of those people that has always kind of been like a soft believer. I'm like, I'm not going to say no just because I haven't seen it or no one's found it. But, and so like, I don't know. I'm thinking about the implications of being a half believer. Do I half experience Bigfoot because I half believe it?
I don't know. Maybe. Does Bigfoot need your belief to exist? That's a good question.
Probably not at this point.
But yeah, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to touch on what Ben said about the fact that sometimes these stories, they're made with an intent and a purpose, and it gets lost. And I've seen that happen as well. Sometimes they last. For example, the Ramayana is an ancient tale of, karma and duty and how to treat people and what everyone's role in their society is, and that's lasted this entire time. But then I've also seen strange things like this belief that our ancestors are angry with us, and that there are certain, for example, at Hindu weddings, there are certain things that you must do, and you must invite your ancestors. Otherwise, the pots will turn black and things will happen and your ancestors will ruin the wedding and all kinds of other stuff. And it's so interesting to see how things got kind of twisted and lost, because, when I really stop and think about it, how is that so? It doesn't quite fit into the grander belief system, and yet it's such an ingrained part of so many of these ceremonies that people just do it, and so it's interesting to kind of see how things get warped and who might have warped them along the way, and that's been something that's always been very interesting for me to explore.
That's fair. I think I know the point that I'm trying to get to here is that we are allowed to create things from very, scary things from very human pieces. So there doesn't have to be something mystical for a monster to appear. Legends themselves are typically good things that happen. And a lot of times they're based on things that we want to aspire to be. Who's your hero? It's about aspirational goals. There's actually psychology that shows that people, when they imagine themselves as their best self, actually act more justly in the world around. So when people are using an avatar of a hero in a game, they tend to act much more like a hero than if they try to make a character who looks more like an average person or a anti-hero or things of that nature. How they perceive of themselves affects how they act in the world around them. And that's kind of what a lot of these lessons are about. Perceiving the world around you to change how you act or react. And beliefs have a huge impact on how we, on the actions that we choose. Again, in this case, this is neurology, not even psychology. The part of our brain that stores beliefs that is the same part of our brain that controls actions. It is also not the part of our brain that controls rational thought. Nobody acts rationally. We rationalize what we do because that's how neurology works. And so that's a little bit of science that's being built into this game here, is how do you tap into beliefs as a way to drive action? So that's the final thought that I have on that piece for you all. Since I'm not seeing any other questions in chat, are there any questions from the group? Any things that you want to explore before we close the curtain on this very successful alpha playtest series?
Oh, mine's under red tape.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Not quite ready for public consumption?
No, not yet, but soon.
Okay, then let's talk about the future. What's one thing that you're and do our outros? What's one thing that you're excited about Omens Rising that is on its way? Something that we're going to be doing in the future that you want to make sure that people are aware of?
Like how much lore is actually inside of this? Like
So much lore.
so much of it.
And not all of it'll be in the core book, because sometimes you have to build something just to get to what's on the surface. We're building from the ground up. So sorry, but yeah,
No,
right. So much lore.
Yeah, all that nitty gritty stuff. That's the stuff. That like particular rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I'm excited in terms of plugging the stuff that I will eventually assist in the writing of. But I just think the imagery of, just imagine like a landscape and then like a giant sleeping structure. Where did it come from? What is it? What does it do? Find out next time is kind of the thing that I'm working on. So I'm excited about some of the big ancient Aether tech that I will be working on. Very, very keen on that.
The colossi, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I love Iron Giants. That's a big favorite of mine. So watch that space. And yeah, well, I love the lore as well. The exposure to a lot more of like the cultures and just like little bits and bobs of those is something else that I'm really excited to share and to watch, I guess, also on future alpha play tests.
Oh yeah. 1000% that.
Yeah. Oh man. I think that's most of the stuff that I'll happily talk about at the moment. I was going to just yell ghost trains, but like that's like an in-joke kind of thing.
But it may actually show up, so we'll see.
We might have ghost trains.
There may be at least one ghost train.
Might have ghost trains. I'm gonna put that in quotation marks on the
Wassa wants ghost train.
I don't think Wassa is alone in that either.
No,
so
it's
it's whether or not it makes it to the final cut is really the question there.
We are all aboard the ghost train.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Instead of choo choo, it's woo woo.
Love it. Fen, what's something you're excited about seeing?
Is all of it an answer?
Everything.
As somebody who sits on the graphic design side of things, and somebody who watches everybody else put in a lot more in-depth lore world building, I love all of it. I'm excited for all of it. I picked my top culture for this one, and I would love to go through all of them at some point and play them all, because they're all so wonderful, so diverse. And
13 in total.
Yep. We touched on 5 of them here, and actually 4 of them, excuse me, because we doubled up on silent wonders. So there's 9 more to go.
I am going to give you a rebuttal, Fen. I disagree that as a graphic designer, your contributions are any less.
I'm not going to say I don't have any less contributions. They asked what I was excited about, not what I did. Nobody asked me.
I just want to be clear, because it sounded like you were about to be like, no, I haven't done as much as these writers. No, my friend. You are equally valuable because you give life to it in a completely different way from us.
Yes, I know, but I'm trying to ask what I was excited about, not what I'm good at.
That's fair.
So yeah, I'm excited for all that, and I'm excited for just the world in general. I'm excited to play more of this in the future. This is just a me moment. I'm
probably going to be watching streams like
same
when it comes out in the future, just being like, I am perceiving.
Yeah, I want to just quickly add, I love the fact that, we have a lot more cultures, but the fact that we have 2 very different characters from a very like same culture but very different has been fantastic.
Yes.
And I think that that's kudos to, you know, the wonderful writing by Chantel and the wonderful world built by Chantel, but also the flexibility that can come with this, because you are just not isolated and put in a box when it comes to a specific character type sort of thing, or a culture and those things.
Because of how much of the character building is done without the culture really even connected to it, you can create this very in-depth character that sits in a very different part of the culture than another character, even though they're in the same culture. And the belief systems that they have as two different factions of that culture.
I like to say that the cultures inform the decisions your characters make.
Wasa, why are you putting this in chat? You already yelled at me about it.
I know. I'm a constant yelling machine.
I know we all are, really.
That's all I do.
No. But hi, outro. I'm Fen. I do the graphic design of the character sheet for this lovely game. And I'm excited for more of it. I'm excited for more.
And where can we find you on the internet?
Oh yeah, you can find me at Twitter, Fennicini. Same name as on here. That's the easiest way to do it. Okay, bye. I'll stop taking every time. Sorry.
You're
I'm so
fine.
sorry.
Why are you sorry?
Cause I'm gonna be, and you can't stop me.
It's his prerogative.
I needed to just post that because that's what everyone has done thus far. This is the outro, and we have not outroed anyone.
Let's move on to Leona. Leona, let's do your
Leona.
I'm gonna take a completely different path. I'm excited for the merch because the ideas that we have for the merch, oh my god, the ideas are phenomenal. So I'm excited to see what makes the final cut and what we actually release into the world, because oh my goodness, there are so many cool things in this game, and like I won't spill any secrets of any ideas that have been happening, but I think there are so many opportunities for very cool merch things between all of the beautiful art and all of the amazing cultures and all of the components that make up this game, that I'm excited to own a piece of Omens Rising that is tangible, that I can like wear or show people and be like, this is my baby. So I'm really excited for the merch because I want to just show off this game to the world, and I hope that everyone else will love the amazing merch whenever it happens. But that's in the future, so you have to stick around and find out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, Simon. There will be an Omens Rising deck of cards.
Oh, I was gonna say
that's really gonna happen.
About that. I didn't want to say specifically a deck of cards, but
yes, that will happen. When, I don't know yet, but that will happen.
But that means you gotta stay with us on the journey to find out when it does.
You do.
So thank you, Leona. Did you tell us where to find you?
Nope, because I got excited. Hello, I'm Leona. You can find me on Twitter at the Leona Meeple. That is the best place to find out about what I am doing and where I am and all of the things that I can't talk about because they are under NDA. But yeah, so follow me on Twitter to hear about things as they happen, as I can talk about them, and join us on this little show called Vibrant Legends that typically runs on Saturdays, and you can find out more about that on my Twitter as well. So that's all I'll say there.
Excellent, thank you. Wasa?
I'm Wasa. This is me. I'm the nerd behind the machine of breaking stuff, trains, and big machine things. I also write. I am on Wasabote on Twitter, and that is the only place I believe that you can find me right now. I am also of the land of NDA, and I am traversing those wilds and wildernesses. So watch that space. Mostly my Twitter is about me currently watching My Hero Academia. So if you like that stuff, talk to me. But that's pretty much me.
Where do we find you?
That's me, guys.
Where do we find you?
Wasabote on Twitter. WASABOTTE. It is. I'm going to drop it down on the thing.
And Jamar. Oh, yes.
It is me. I'm Jamar. Again, I wrote The Witches. I said, I know there's technology here. I said, fuck all that. I will not be taking part. So I made the creepiest witches possible. And I am writing a graphic novel. So I don't really have an NDA, but I can't talk about it either way. So there's that. But you can find me on the internet being a meme. And so I am on Twitter at Poppy Wolves. Poppy spelled like Spanish for dad, not Poppy as in the thing that will make you high.
Also known as a flower.
Oh, that.
Yeah. Also, more importantly,
I thought flower.
Yes, you can technically.
I was
use it
just
as
thinking milk of the poppy. Yeah.
Yeah, there you
go. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Jamar. And I'm Chris Geary. You can find me in Twitch chat and on Twitter as @Chris Geary. I keep it kind of simple in that way. I am the lead designer and I guess kind of overall trying to keep track of all the different pieces that are going all at once of Omens Rising. Please check us out at Omens Rising on Twitter. You can also find us on Facebook, also at Omens Rising. There, we will be having more of our lovely playtests, 6 of them in total. Between now and sometime in August or September, we'll wrap up the last of them. Please keep in touch with our Twitter space is the best place to get in touch and learn about what we're doing. So thank you again for your time, and thank you one more time to Wandering DM and all of Wandering DM's sponsors.
Thank you.
Roll20, Found Familiar, Mage Hand Press. Thank you. You guys have been great. And so for the last time on this channel, Omens Rising, signing off.
Bye-bye, y'all.
Bye.